Today on the Workit Health podcast, I am talking with Marc Lee Shannon, musician, recovery coach, author, and longtime member of the Michael Stanley Band. Marc grew up in Akron, Ohio, the birthplace of AA, and the same city where he eventually got sober. I actually recently spent some time with Marc in Ohio, and just let me say, he's an incredible human and storyteller. We talk about family secrets, the myth of the high functioning addict, and so much more. You're going to have to listen. I'm Max. This is the Work It Health Podcast. Here's my conversation with Marc Lee Shannon.
So what's my story is what everybody wants. So isn't it interesting? So to me as an artist, right? And I guess in recovery, when I meet people, one of the first things I ask myself is, what's their story? Not just in recovery. I want to know, because it tells me a lot about where they came from and what they're about, right? Right before we started this, we talked about, authenticity. And so I listen to people tell their story. So my story is pretty simple. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, right? Midwest, right? It was an industrialized town that was, pretty working class, you know. There was a part of town where people built tires, really, and then there was a part of town that was like sort of the executive, a lot of union based, and so, working class town. And so a lot of people I grew up with worked with Firestone, Goodrich. And, even to this day, you can pull up an obit and see 35 years, 40 years with one of those companies, right? So it was working class. And my parents, bless their heart, you know, they did the best they could, but I was part of a blended family, but I didn't know it. Grew up in a Catholic family, and they were married. It was not my mom's first marriage, but it was my dad's first marriage. And in that world that they lived in, there was like a hush, 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 don't say anything. So there was a lot of secrets in my family, right? So not to go into too much because it is what it is, but my childhood was full of a lot of secrets, a lot of people that maybe weren't so kind to me, right? Physically, So I learned very early on who to trust and who not to trust, right? When I was 11 years old, my parents sat us down because they had decided to get a divorce. And they said, that's the deal. And you need to pick who you want to live with. And I'm 11, so they couldn't make the decision themselves, which is interesting. And by the way, we never told me, your two older sisters, and you had a different father. So I was part of a blended family, but I didn't know it, right? So at that moment in time, whether the 11-year-old could face it, could really understand it or not, he knew one thing. Everybody in his life had not told him the truth, right? So there was a feeling, whether I could put it into words or not, like, I'm not going to need people. I don't want to need you. I don't want to need anybody because can't trust people, right? And again, I don't know if 11-year-old Mark could put it in those words, but the result of it was that I didn't ever want to ask for help from people. Didn't do it. Not at school, not learning how to play sports, not anything. No way. If I couldn't figure it out on my own, I just didn't do it. So I gravitated towards activities where where I did it on myself. I love basketball because I could practice it on my own. I loved golf because I could practice it on my own. I love subjects at school that were really individual study, and that was cool. And I'll get into my substance use really, really quick because I don't want to take the whole thing about Mark Lee's story. But my first drink, somewhere around freshman year, my trouble cousin came over, right? The one that's like going to be a lot of fun, but you're going to be in trouble at the end of the night. And he dared me to find my dad's booze because by now I lived with him. And, it was a great big green bottle of Scotch whiskey, and the brand was Cuddy Sark. I'll never forget that. He poured a great big drink, and there's three things I remember about that, right? What it tastes like going down, what it tastes like coming up, and waking up on a cold bathroom floor. I was a blackout drinker, right? So some of us are built differently. Some of us have allergies towards peanuts. Some of us have allergies towards, alcohol. I just was different. Some guys could go to the football game and have a beer. That just didn't work for me. I was different. In high school, I did smoke a lot of left-handed cigarettes. I loved music. I loved sports. And I was good enough to make teams, but not good enough to play, really. So after a while, I went to a Catholic high school. It was, pretty competitive with sports. And after a while, even though I could make the teams, it wasn't fun to just do all that work and not play. So music was my thing. Fast forward to senior year, I had a teacher that really believed in me much more than I did because I didn't have any confidence. Again, didn't believe I could do anything really. I just didn't have any confidence. She did, and I entered a song into a National Scholastic Writing Awards contest and did well enough to give me some confidence, right? I think it was like a National Certificate of Merit or something like that. They only give out a few. I didn't win, but it was good enough to go, hey, maybe there's something here. So I've been playing in bands and all that stuff and doing all that thing. So I decided I'm leaving for LA. Found myself in Los Angeles going to a guitar school that had accepted only 120 kids worldwide. It was called the Guitar Institute then. I had to be 119. No training. I got in on the strength of a audition, right? Which I have no idea how I did that. They must have just needed somebody, right? Anyway, I lucked in. I lucked in. So that was my big break. And I got in, scrape. First year, no money. I lived on a slice of Two Guys Pizza, which is a pretty famous pizza place on Hollywood Boulevard. And I lived in an apartment right across from Hollywood High School and walked the boulevard every day to go to school. And, because I was behind everybody else, I had this strong ability to rely on myself. So I really studied hard. But what I could do that the other kids couldn't do is I had been in band, so I could do it, right? So I got work right away. And of course they hated me. And right away I could excel. It was different for me because they all went home to their homes in Sherman Oaks or, to Santa Monica. And I had this really crappy little roach infested apartment in Hollywood. So I had to lean in. I had to lean in. I needed money. I borrowed people's cars to go get gigs. I did. It just didn't, to me, it didn't seem different. It was like, I always had to do that. So I did pretty well in LA, but unfortunately in LA, I found other substances, right? And I could tell you a bunch of stories about that, which would be funny and using humor, but that's for another time. So anyway, so eventually I came back home to Ohio because guess what I thought? I thought it was all those other people. If I get away from that guy, he's got my number. If I don't get away from that bar, they pour heavy. It's her problem, right? So unfortunately, when I came back home, I took me with me, right? So I figured, well, I'll quit. I'll just do this. I'm married and I got a kid. But the problem was I took me with me, and as we all know, people who have a substance use disorder, it's not something that, you can look at like, it's like, I'll just give it up, because I kept thinking it's me. It's me. It's my choice. I can, I listen to what I'm saying. I got this. Leave it up to me. It's my problem, right? I me, my, I me, my, I me, mine. Well, I kept thinking I was strong enough, Superboy here, right here. Well, we all know that in modern, the neuroscience of addiction will tell us that the reality is that it's a mental health and a physical health disorder, and without treatment, you don't get well. You just don't get well. You might delay it for a while, baby, but you're not going to get well. And so, that was my story. I quit for 30 days, man. I got this. And then I go back. So eventually I entered a 12-step program, but I got this, right? I got this. You don't tell me, I tell you. You don't tell me, I tell you. I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't work the steps. I didn't get a big book. I showed up, because by then I'm in the corporate world. You don't tell me, I tell you. I got a nice suit on. You know what I'm saying? I'm making some money. You don't tell me, I tell you. Right. And of course, that didn't work. Right. And I lasted probably 4.5 years, white knuckled it, and went out for another 11 years of pure hell. Divorced by now, big surprise, 3 beautiful children. And finally came back in around 2018 and headed to detox, leaving out a lot of the good, juicy stuff. Right? But on June 2nd, 2014, I entered St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, Ohio, which happened to be the place where the great foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous was founded. Akron, Ohio. And that was in that ward where I had a spiritual awakening. And, when I say spiritual, that's my definition. Y'all can call it whatever you want. It's okay. You get to use whatever crayons you want, color your world. You know what I'm saying? It's a wonderful world. All the colors work. Everybody's welcome in that definition. But to me, it was, hey, maybe my spiritual awakening was maybe if I decide to help other people, maybe I'll get it this time. Maybe if I say, please help me and let people help me, maybe I'll get it this time. Maybe if I just decide that just today, I'm not going to try anything. I'm just going to not use. I just do what I can do not to use, right? So it was those 3 things. Don't use today. You join a group of peers that are like me, Me too. You lost your job? Me too. Your family's not happy with you? Me too. Oh, your work don't like you? Me too. That thing, don't use. Me too. And helping other people. Those three things really made a difference to me. And so thankfully, and I always write it down because I like to know for these things, 11 years, 7 months, and 21 days of no alcohol to me at this point. Now, there were other side dishes, you know what I mean? The left-handed cigarette stuff. That to me, I think for a lot of reasons that, back in the day with the amount of THC that was in cannabis at that time, I probably had used it more for my anxiety and my depression, you know what I mean? But there's just no way that that would work for me today. People ask me, well, why don't you could do a little bit, but I say, what I've learned is total abstinence is the only way for me. And they say, well, how do you cope with your anxiety and your occasional depression? I said, I've tried the drugs, right? But I've learned that what works for me is socializing and exercising, you know? And those two things, when I feel like I'm down and low, if I pick up the phone or if I go to a 12-step meeting or I call up a buddy, we have a cup of coffee, do what we're doing here, Max, you know what I mean? Talking about it, you know what I mean? Help other people. Those things tend to lift me up. My issue is isolation. I get it. And then I always tell my friends, you don't hear from me for a long period of time. You're texting me, you're calling me, I'm not answering you. Guaranteed I'm in trouble. Guaranteed. So that's my side to my friends. So that's really my story. After that, I decided, in my business world, in my life world, I needed to change one thing, everything. And that meant I had to quit doing the high pressure job that I had. I need to get out of my big life that I had into a small life. And I needed to dedicate myself to working on helping other people. I started writing a monthly column in a local community magazine, which turned into a book called Sober Chronicles. I, developed this little presentation thing called The Sound of Recovery. And I started back playing music again with a different intention. And that was much more about what I want to play, when I want to play, and who I want to play with. In the meantime, when I came back from Ohio, I hooked up with a local legend, a guy named Michael Stanley, who, if you're from Cleveland, you know him. He was the Bruce Springsteen of Cleveland, right? And I did 25 years with him and 23 records, and he was a fantastic mentor for me. So if you're from this area, you know that name, but if not, it's kind of like, every area that has a guy like Michael Stanley that had his hits, Michael had a couple hits, and then went back home, right? But you'd hear a song, go, I know that song. I know that song. Michael had a couple of those, and we played with the Eagles. We played with Kansas. We On the summertime we get on a plane, we go places. So it was fun. He was my friend, and so I was really blessed because I came back home and I had a lot of success. And he was a huge supporter of my well living and sobriety. Really, really, really big supporter. Along the way, I became a certified recovery coach in the state of Ohio, which is called a peer recovery supporter. They had to have one nomenclature, so that's what they settled on. But I'm a recovery coach. I'm not a therapist, not a counselor. I mean, not a physician, I'm not a clinician. I'm just a guy that meets people at the front door and says, I can't tell you what to do, but this is what I did. So listen, you know, and maybe you'll learn something. So that's it. And then somehow I got hooked up with these incredible people from Workit, and everyone I've met has just been so amazing. And what they do is such a valuable tool because I will tell you, if I had Workit available to me when I first got sober, it would have been so great because I was just not comfortable getting out some days, right? And I know this because during the pandemic, I was so comfortable with online meetings. That was like I almost did it every single day, sometimes twice a day, because it was so comfortable and so easy. And if I could have that experience in early recovery or as a support in recovery now, I know I would have done that. I know it. So I know the concept of Workit works. And if the people at Workit are anything like the people I've had a contact with, it's a sure winner. It's just a sure winner. I mean, you and the people I work with on the HRSA grant team, man, they're amazing. Just amazing people. So kind, so generous, just really, really cool. I'm very lucky. That's my story.
And I know that was just a kind of getting the basics across and that there's a lot more to your story, and we've captured some of that on your live concert that we did.
Hmm.
Almost like it's an album and different parts of your recovery are certain tracks. I kinda like
Yeah,
thinking that way. I mean, there's many things I relate to with your story, but definitely one of them is this idea of a high functioning addict and, like, the pros and cons of that. In fact,
right.
when you were speaking earlier, I was thinking that your independent drive that is, like, one of your strongest assets kinda
Mhm.
bit you in the butt too, trying to find
Yeah,
or being able to say, "Actually, I do need help."
yeah,
And so, tell me about, what it was like to be a high functioning addict, because you said you were big up in corporate at one point, but also a
yeah.
touring musician, both of which require you to, like, play a role and
It's really down to how efficiently you can hide, right?
Mhm.
How well
Yep.
can you hide your stuff? Well, I mean, in the corporate world, let me just address that. There is a culture within some companies where, I was in sales and marketing, so I was directly responsible for revenue attainment, right? So if you're getting your numbers, if you're bringing in the bucks, you're pretty much judged only on that, right? And again, I was in leadership positions, I think at one point in time, including internal people and external reps and everything. I probably was responsible for around 300 downstream direct and indirect reports, right? And a large amount of money was relying on that. Now, that revenue attainment fed everything. I built a team or teams built on people that could really drive hard, and we were successful. And that's what makes successful teams, especially in sales and marketing. And when you're going out and getting the money, that's what it takes. And we were very, very good for the companies I worked with. The downside of that is you get forgiven a lot of sins. So I could disappear on a little drunk vacation and it would be, overlooked sometimes. Now, towards the end, it was more difficult because I was in the ICU 3 times, right? And that was the cascading effect of continued alcoholism and the sickness that I had. You know what happens when a type 2 diabetic drinks straight vodka for 11 days? You're in trouble, man. You're in trouble. And I had people around me enabling me, going and getting me booze. And I had great techniques for getting them to do what I wanted them to do because what do we do is as addicts, we make people do what we right. I was very good at that. And I had a lot of amends to make when I got sober. But finally, it crashed. It all just crashed. And but the high functioning part of it, I think it could be glamorized, but what I remember about it, Max, is just the misery of the shame and the fear of being caught. Really quick story, but when GPS first came out, right? So I rented a car. Mr. Bates, it's got GPS. I wanted to go see a blues band in some city. I can't recall what city it was. So I'm thinking, I'm good. I got GPS. I can get back to the hotel. Well, the GPS took me to the wrong place every single time. So I put in the hotel address, but it took me to the wrong place. It was the address, but it wasn't the hotel. And I'm like, I'm slammered. Can't even remember how I got out of that. You know what I mean? But it was nights like that. No, I wouldn't call that high functioning at all. Again, we like to glamorize our drunk logs. You know what I mean? But it was misery, man. It was just misery. And so when people like us, sit down with somebody that's in early recovery, I think that's the part of the Me Too that we can sit down and go, man, I get it. I get it. I get it. And we can say something where they see in our eyes and in our hearts that we've related to that sort of thing. And that's where we have the opportunity for us in this recovery community as people that are in recovery, we can help people because you can't fake that stuff, man. You can't fake that stuff. And more physicians that I work with in the hospital format are telling me over and over again, Mark, the peer support is so valuable to us because you guys can connect on a level that I can't do it. I can't do it. So it's really valuable, really valuable.
I'm really rethinking this idea of a high functioning addict now as you talk about it, because I think maybe it's the myth of the high functioning addict, right?
Well, when you
Because it's we're high functioning at hiding it, high functioning at keeping secrets,
right, right. Why?
But
I
were
think,
we really functioning? Because you're 100% right. I would say
yeah.
90% of my drinking career was sick, was
Mm,
just sick. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Like,
Oh my God, waking up in the morning and you're like, "Oh my God, I feel like terrible." The first thing I would think next was, "I did it again." Because I
yeah,
mean, people tell me, "How did you know? How did you know you had a problem?" Blah, blah, blah. And I would say 2 things. I would tell myself I wasn't gonna do it, and then I couldn't not do it, right? And then once I started doing it, I couldn't control how much I was doing, right? I mean, once that first drink hit, woo, let's go, baby. As long as there's money in the wallet or whatever, partay. And it wouldn't stop until I passed out, ran out of money, got into some sort of jackpot, right? And thankfully, I wasn't a lawbreaker, right? I do not have a criminal record, but I could have easily been stopped 100 times, right? And, but that first drink, and that's what I think a lot of people say to me. You work at nightclubs, you still work around booze. Don't you ever like get the bitches? I said, no, you know why? Because I remember what it felt like when I had that first drink and how I couldn't not have the second one, right? It just doesn't work that way for me. There's just no one drink. There's just no one drink. It's like one Lay's potato chip. I know that's a joke, right? But the reality of it is that once you start as a alcoholic, it's over. It doesn't matter. Because if I would have a drink now, and I had a counselor who said this to me, and she had been sober for a long time. She goes, Mark, if I have one drink, you might as well fill this whole room up with alcohol because I'm going all the way. She had 30 years of sobriety. And I said, I get it. I get it. She goes, I don't ever, ever consider that first drink. And it's like, me too. Me too. I just wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. So I know those 2 things to be absolutely true, and yeah, that's just not gonna happen. No matter what happens to me, that's just not gonna be part of it. I just know it. I wouldn't wanna do that to myself. I had enough of it.
I know of a few people who have had consistent sobriety and then went back to moderate, and this isn't, a study by any means, but not
Mm,
one of them successfully could moderate after trying moderation. What is it? I think it's AA. Is it like what 1 is never enough, but 1,000 is also never
yeah,
enough or something like that? Like, that
yeah,
is
yeah.
yeah.
Well, there is a place in neuroscience that says if you can do that, then maybe you weren't functionally an alcoholic to begin with, right? But the neuroscience of addiction has to do with what happens with your prefrontal cortex and your midbrain, right? So, I mean, you could have been in a situation in your life where you could have been, just something else was happening and you used alcohol as a coping skill, right? But you have to be careful because a lot of those people who say they aren't an alcoholic anymore, became a gymaholic. They became a foodaholic. They became a sexaholic. They became something else. No, 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 I don't drink anymore. I don't drink anymore. Yeah, but dude, you go to the gym 4 times a day. Or dude, you're on your gambling app all day long. What's up with that? Obsessively, compulsively checking social media, right? Or restricting your food to the point where you have to measure every single calorie. I'm out of carbs. I had 3 more carbs than I should have had yesterday. Oh, what's wrong with me? Right? I mean, so it is what it is, but it is I believe a mental health consideration, if not a condition. No doubt about it. Because that's what was happening. I mean, and I like to tell people when they say to me, well, what caused it? I said, well, my durability wore down, you know? I just stress, broken heart, a lot of those things. My durability wore down. My tires got flat, man. Just couldn't fix it. Couldn't fix it. It's hard making that turn to have faith in yourself to know you're not going to use. I mean, I don't know what your experience was, but for me, when I turned off that road and I went into detox, I had to confront number one, what I effed up my life. Number one. Number two, the loneliness of going back home and seeing the pair I had to begin to make. Number three, feeling like, you know what? Money, what? I'm screwed. Right. And then everybody going, let's see if he gets it this time. Even God bless him, my kids, they had watched me. But, I love to tell the story and I hope he remembers it. But about a year and a half later, my middle child, I won't say his name, we were driving down the road and he was telling me about how scared he was one time. And he, was worried and started crying. And I said, I'm doing better now, son. And then he wiped his eyes and said, yeah, I know, Dad, I don't worry about you anymore. That was the greatest gift he could give me. And I still get emotional thinking about him saying, I don't worry about you anymore. Isn't that what we all want from our loved ones? Just stop worrying about me. I'll be okay. You want to get to that point where they trust you enough to know you're not going to go off the rails. I think anybody watching this or listen to this podcast can relate in their recovery where they got to the moment where people started believing in them that they wouldn't go off the rails one more time, right? Because that's a turning point to me. That was a turning point. And it took about a year, year and a half. 'Cause I had seen it all before. You know, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. I don't got this, right? But now it's been, 11, 7, 21. So all I know is I ain't gonna F it up. That's it. I ain't gonna F it up. No, ain't gonna happen. And what an honor for me to be able to come on and talk to you about this too. I just want to, if we are wrapping up, I just want to say that to people out there that are listening to this, you know, I'm not an employee of Workit. I'm just a contractor, and I don't necessarily become associated with companies unless there's the right. I don't want to use the word feel, but I just the right sense of fit, right? And everyone I've worked with this organization. And what is it? What is it? The most important thing when you meet people that makes you feel like you belong with them. I think it has to do with intention, right? One of the most important questions I ask myself when I meet people, besides what's their story, is what's their intention? What are they really trying to do, right? And I just get this overwhelming, permeating feeling that the people at work are really trying to lean in and help people. And I think maybe it's because of the origin story where it came from. I can tell you I work with other organizations in the recovery community that I don't sense that always, right? Because it is a business. It is. And you gotta cross your things and do your things, and X's and O's have to equal out. You have to draw in accounts terms, you have to draw the double line under things. But I do get the sense that if you're out there listening, and if you've familiar with my music and my writings and stuff like this, I can tell you that my endorsement really is about their intention. And I do feel that with you guys. So it's really been an honor to be able to be associated with you. And I hope going forward in the future, that's something that we can continue to do, because I do feel like I'm a team member with you guys. And it's just like, no, I just really want to just hold your lantern up high. Really, it's just been a really, really cool thing. So I've been so honored. It's been such a privilege for me to work with you guys. And I'm looking forward to the end of the month and next month and what happens beyond that.
Thank you. It's markleeshannon.substack.com.
Yep.
And I just want to point out that, like, I know that you're a songwriter, but gosh, can you feel it in your writing? I mean, it's poetry to I think, and I
Yeah.
can almost hear the music in it. And you're right. I don't want to say everyone has a lesson, because I don't think you're proselytizing or anything,
Yeah.
but every single one has a viewpoint you hadn't thought about, or every single one has just this nugget. And I love how you also phrase that as, you gotta keep going, you gotta switch things up. You said you were feeling some sort of a way and you were like, "Let me try this Substack thing." Where can folks kinda keep an eye out on where you're performing? What's the best way for them to,
So
keep
still,
keep
it's
on
our
all things Mark Lee Shannon?
it's archaic, but I mean, you can if you want to find me, just put an at symbol anywhere on any platform and put it in front of my name. It's MarcLeeShannon. And if you plug that into multiple different platforms, you'll find me. So I'm all over the place with that nomenclature of social media. I still keep a website, although I'm not sure websites are really that relevant anymore for musicians, but I keep one. I'm slimming
Mhm,
it down. It doesn't have a whole bunch of, you know, shine on it anymore. But I think people will still want to find out, oh, what do I do this? How can I find this? What about this? I I I'm really debating whether or not that really makes a difference. But no, in the local region, I do that, and I think that people, when they're going and looking for something, they make their minds up to do it, to find it. People find you if
mhm.
they're looking. They're looking for you. That's all we got to do. Let's just be us today. How about that? It's not because I trust me, man. I'm having a hard enough time figuring out who I am most of the time. So if I could just be me today for a little while, I did good. I did good.
Mhm,
And do
mhm.
something kind for people, help them out, do a nice thing for people, be good, be kind, do good, be good. That's it. That's my thing today. Do good, be good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A huge thank you to Mark Lee Shannon for sharing his story with us. You can find his writing at markleeshannon.substack.com, and you can find more from Mark pretty much anywhere online at Mark Lee Shannon. And you can check out the Sound of Recovery on our YouTube page at youtube.com/workithealth. And if you enjoyed this conversation, follow or subscribe to the Work It Health podcast wherever you listen. I'm Max, and this is the Work It Health podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.